Good evening, and thanks for joining us. I'm Maria Parham, editorial page editor for the Arizona Daily Star. Tonight on AZ Illustrated Metro, we'll focus on efforts to analyze or improve civility in politics. First, we talk with former U.S. Senator Olympia Snowe, who left office because of unproductive partisanship. Next, we check in with the Institute for Civil Discourse on its efforts to change political communication. Then we look at the way we handle disagreement at town halls and what we can learn from it. But first, a look at today's top stories.
Arizona Governor Jan Brewer won't run for re-election this fall. She made the announcement today in a speech in Phoenix, saying she wants to, quote, pass the torch. Brewer had hinted earlier that she might find a way to run for and serve another term, despite the state constitution limiting governors to 2 terms. Her announcement led to an outpouring of praise for her from other politicians, including several of her fellow Republicans who are running to replace her. Brewer moved from Secretary of State to governor when Janet Napolitano departed in 2009 to join the Obama administration. Brewer was elected to a full term in 2012, and she will leave office next January. A report on the status of minorities in Arizona schools got an airing before the legislature today. The report from the Arizona Minority Education Policy Analysis Center notes the disparity in achievement between white students and minorities, and it calls for improved teaching of English as a second language, expanded financial aid for minority college students, and minority graduation rate goals at the college level. The number of houses for sale in the Tucson area increased 4.5% last month, the highest number in nearly 3 years. That's from a report by the Tucson Association of Realtors. It says more than 5,700 houses were for sale in February. The report also says the average price for the nearly 1,000 houses that sold last month was $196,000. And that's a look at tonight's headlines.
Tonight, we are exploring a number of efforts to make government more productive and less divisive. We'll begin with an interview Andrea Kelly conducted last week when former U.S. Senator Olympia Snowe was in town. She traveled here to speak at the University of Arizona Law School about breaking through political polarization.
When you left Congress after more than 30 years in the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate, one of your stated reasons was the partisan divide. What is your perspective on that now that you've been out of office for more than a year?
Well, regrettably, it's only gotten worse. And I surmised when I made my decision, and it was upon which I made my decision, that it would not improve, at least in the short term, and that I could best contribute my voice in a different way, other than being inside the institution where I didn't think the change would occur, but rather it would occur on the outside, with public support. And so as I, look at Congress from afar and what's happening in Washington, it really is a travesty for the country. I have traveled everywhere in America, and, so many people expressed to me their fears about this continuation of this political paralysis that prevents and impedes our nation from, providing the solutions that are so essential to this country's future.
Reflect on that decision. Has it been easier to work on this issue outside of Congress?
Absolutely. People are listening. They understand it. It is amazing. Wherever I go, whether it's on college campuses or different groups or conferences or different political persuasions, it doesn't matter if people are on the right or the left. At the end of the day, they want their government to function and they want it to work. And what they have witnessed in Washington is a dysfunctional Congress, and the inability of the President and the Congress to work together and to make decisions, large or small, for the good of the country. And it leaves them despairing, wondering about the future, wondering about their children's future. And that's why it's created so much uncertainty, lacking confidence about the direction of our country, and most certainly the shape of our economy, according to recent polls, and what it portends for their children as well.
What are you doing to work on the issue now?
What I'm doing is I'm speaking to various groups, talking about what needs to be done, how they can become active, and we have to engage the public in this process. Lawmakers and candidates have to hear from the public themselves through social media, online technology. I, for example, am associated with great organizations. National Institute for Civil Discourse right here at the University of Arizona is a spectacular group talking about how do you reduce it, the hostility and the divisiveness in our government and also in our policy making and all levels of government, frankly. And then secondly, I've joined the Bipartisan Policy Center where I'm a senior fellow, and we will come out with a series of recommendations in June, on June 24th, on congressional electoral reforms, in addition to how we can encourage people to participate in public office and public service, including our young people. So I'm speaking about it, telling what people can do to engage them, to give them hope, and this is realistic hope, that we can take back, our government and make it represent, the issues and the concerns and the positions that are so important for the broader population, not just appealing to a narrow ideological base and not doing what's right for the best interests of the common good.
You mentioned some proposed reforms for Congress to help the situation. Congress has, we've seen, been reluctant to impose reforms on itself. So describe what some of those are.
Yes, most of these reforms would take place, well, for example, it would take place, with the state legislatures or through referendum on questions like independent redistricting commission. So we can break up, the consolidation of these districts that are, solidly Republican or Democrat. They've been, reconfigured and designed, to make sure that there's no competition other than within the primary. And that's really what's happened in Congress, because everything is narrowly focused towards the primary, where they fear the threat, as opposed to the general election. So you don't have a competition of ideas. Rather, the competition's within the party itself, within these primaries. So we have to go back and really make sure that for the next census taken, when they have to redraw the maps in the House of Representatives, that we have more competitive seats that compels people to have to look to a broader segment of population for support, not just for the narrow party base. Open primaries, having independents being able to vote in a primary. Again, muting and diluting the ideological and extreme interests in these political primaries. Campaign finance reform is another issue that we'll have to look at. It's not easy because you have to deal with constitutional questions. And an array of other issues as well, where the public can demand accountability and productivity on the part of Congress, I might add. Incorporating 5-day work weeks, at least 3 weeks out of the month, and then a week that people can spend in their districts or their states.
Since you've left office, how effective do you think you have been, or the organizations that you're working with?
Time will tell, but I know one thing, that the feelings about Congress and what needs to be done, and every time I mention some of these issues that I proposed in my book that I wrote was on fighting for common ground, there's almost, universal support. I mean, people understand it intuitively. They're thirsting for, strong leadership. They're thirsting to be part of something that can accomplish these goals and to do something about it, because they are fearful, as I said, that this is going to be a continuation and that it's going to become institutionalized as our way, as a way of reaching decisions or not reaching a decision in Washington. And so they want to know what they can do about it, because the worst thing that could happen for our country is that people despair so much that they withdraw and retreat. They don't vote. They don't become involved. They're not engaged. And I just want to reassure them that we can change this political climate, that we must insist that this is an aberration and not a trend.
Senator Snowe, thanks so much for sitting down with us.
Thank you, Andrea. Appreciate it. Glad to be here.
Next, we seek an update on the Tucson-based National Institute for Civil Discourse. Here's Andrea Kelly again with the Institute's Executive Director.
So Carolyn Lukensmeyer, the National Institute for Civil Discourse was created following the January 8th, 2011 shootings, when there was a lot of talk about how partisanship was dividing people and how people should be communicating with each other in government. What is your mission? Can you restate that for us?
Be happy to. We focus on how incivility has increased in our culture, certainly in politics and government, but in everyday life, and the whole issue of how partisanship has really made government dysfunctional. So our mission is to work with three target audiences: elected officials, the media, and the public. And the way we describe it is that we really need to shift things in our country so that once again, elected officials are taking on the big issues facing the country instead of letting hyperpartisanship mean they don't get anything done. So that's part of our mission. We're also focused on a media that really informs and is fact-based, because as the business model for media has shifted, as you well understand, there really has been less resource committed to good journalism. And with the public, it really is to engage them. So many Americans are angry about what's happened in government and in politics, and even ashamed of what's happened to our government and politics. And yet they don't feel any way to really make a difference. So with the public, our goal is to get them engaged again, to give them hope that if in fact they take action, they can have an influence on what happens with their government, local, state, and national.
The Institute has given some grants for research on some of these topics. What else is going on to actually affect the change that you're talking about?
The research part is very important because what we want to do is connect scholarly research. What causes incivility? What are the leverage points for doing something about political dysfunction? But the scholars we're working with are all doing research toward practice, toward what are things that could be done to change this. Then in terms of our programs with elected officials in Congress, we've established something in the House of Representatives called a Working Group for a Working Congress. It's chaired by Emanuel Cleaver and Kay Granger, and we're doing two projects with them. One is in the House of Representatives. One of the things that's become dysfunctional is the committee structure no longer operates like it did for decades. Leadership, starting in 1978, pulled the decisions out of the committees, took away the committee's authority. So we've now been positioned, and leadership is supporting it, to work with two committees. We're going to start with Energy and Commerce, and I don't know yet what the second is, to reestablish the committee's rightful role in how legislation moves through the House. The second thing we're doing, which I really think the American public will appreciate, is members of opposite parties are going to visit each other's districts. So let me take the chairs as an example. Emanuel Cleaver has been a representative from Kansas City, Missouri for, I believe, 18 years. Kay Granger, similar number of years from Fort Worth, Texas. In the end of April, Kay will go with Emanuel Cleaver to his district, and the National Institute will help design an opportunity for the public, not just people who voted for Representative Cleaver, but anybody in that district to come together to see a Republican member of Congress and a Democrat member of Congress really tackle an issue together. Then we'll do this with other members of the working group, and I think the public will be very, very pleased to see that. In state legislatures, we have a project called Next Generations. And what we understand, or as many of your listeners already know, most members who come to Washington, to the House or to the Senate, start their careers in state legislatures. So we're doing workshops in state legislatures at the request of members. We call it Building Trust Through Civil Discourse. We've already done it in Ohio, Nebraska, Pennsylvania, and Washington. The next scheduled is in Senator Olympia Snow's home state of Maine, and that will happen on March 28th. We will do 11 more states in 2014 and 12 more states in 2015. With the media, in December we held a workshop for 40 working journalists across the country, all four mediums: internet, television, radio, print, and we put in front of them the challenge. The public really sees the media as part of the problem of incivility. So what can journalism do? What can journalists do about that? And this group of journalists actually wrote a statement of a code of values for journalism in the 21st century. The next step will be to hold a similar workshop with news executives, the men and women who are now making the decisions about how resources are allocated to their channel or to their newspaper or to their website, whatever it may be. With the public, we were very fortunate to be invited by the Obama administration after the slaughter of innocents at Newtown. You know, that was a moment. There have been so many mass shootings in this country, and we've almost just come to accept, you in Tucson know that for sure, in the sense that everything stopped for a little bit when Representative Gabby Giffords was shot, but then we just kind of went back to business as usual. And I think all of us felt another layer of, we've got to do something about this after Newtown. So one of the things the administration initiated was a look at the issue of gun violence as it's related to young people, as it's related to mental health. There's a tremendous amount of mythology about that around the country, and frankly, a lot of inadequate services around the country. So I've been chairing a steering committee of 7 organizations, including the National Institute, that have been supporting community conversations about mental health and how communities can take proactive action to support young people in their communities to have the courage to speak up if they feel symptoms themselves, or to reach out their hands to help other young people who they know are struggling in some way with issues of mental health or behavioral health.
Looking back on the overall goals of the Institute, how will you measure effectiveness? How will you know when you've accomplished some of those?
That's a very excellent question and a challenging one. What we've done is in each of the program areas that I described to you, in the legislature, for example, in the state legislatures, because we're more embedded in them already, we're actually taking baseline data about number of bills that have passed, number of members that have solid relationships across the aisle in introducing legislation. In the National Congress, it will be connected mainly to these 2 committees that we work with, and it'd be the same process. Baseline data we're gathering from the members of those committees or subcommittees prior to our work with them, and we will then make a comparison after we've done the work. With the media example that I've given you, I think the primary way we will be able to track that is in each I'm hesitating for a moment because we agreed to do this work really confidentially, but let's say a major newspaper, a reporter that participated from a major newspaper. He or she has developed an action step with her editorial staff or his editorial staff to, for example, one of the areas in print was, we want to cover campaigns differently. Instead of just doing the race, who's going to win? We want to write more articles that really bring the public into a deeper understanding of what the choice between candidate A and candidate B means. So at a micro level, outlet by outlet, we'll have an evaluation standard. But I think in terms of media in general, it will be years before that could be evaluated linked to the kind of work that we're doing.
Thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you for having me.
I'm Gwen Eiffel on the next News Hour. What a closely watched special election in Florida says about the midterm political fights to come. That's Wednesday on the PBS News Hour.
You ever wonder where the caffeine in your soft drink comes from? Probably not a coffee bean, more likely a factory in China.
Sketchy, yeah. I mean, it was not what I expected. It was sort of a rundown industrial park, and this was the world's largest caffeine plant.
I'm David Green. What you don't know about caffeine. That's on the next morning edition from NPR News.
Tonight, we are looking at various attempts to address concerns about divisiveness in politics. Now, we continue the conversation with Norma Mendoza-Denton. She received a grant from the National Institute for Civil Discourse to study behavior of participants and elected officials at town hall events. Norma, thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Can you start out by just telling us how you did this research, how you got to this point?
Well, I've been doing this research for approximately 10 years, well before the this grant from the National Institute for Civil Discourse. And the original intent of the research was to try to highlight a day in the life of a congressperson. And Representative Jim Colby worked with us at the time, with me and with some of my undergraduate students, including Ashley Stinnett. We went and videotaped him, often with a couple of different cameras, around the congressional district that he was representing. In Washington, D.C., we went there a couple of times, and we followed him to all sorts of events, becoming especially interested in town hall meetings.
And so then you added a couple of other politicians to the mix in order to really do the more details of your study, didn't you?
Right, so in order to have a more sort of representative sample, we began to look at data, videotape. We videotaped at town hall meetings for Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords. So we were doing that for a little bit until we had to halt that side of the project due to the terrible events. I also have looked at Rudy Giuliani and his interaction style for trying to manage irate constituents. So I'm especially interested in what happens when representatives meet with irate constituents and all sorts of, I think, loss of face on the one side and trying to manage a potentially threatening situation on the other side.
So just briefly, tell us how you quantify the information that you see, because it's not just you making a judgment on things.
That's right, that's right. So, you might think that I would sit in a room and play the tape back and try to decide, well, that was aggressive or that was conflictive, but that's not exactly how it works. What we do is we transcribe the data, and then we begin to code the data and try to figure out whether a panel of interviewees that we have later will judge a particular phrase or an utterance as conflictive or divisive or provoking a loss of face or something like that. And then we have quite a high inter-transcriber agreement rating for 80 to 90% to try to figure out whether something really was getting in somebody's face.
All right, now describe to us what you found then in doing this kind of research.
What I found is that there are many different styles for expressing conflict. So if you are a constituent and you're angry about something that's happening in your district, often that's the kind of person who shows up at town hall meetings. We don't have the town hall meetings that they have in New England, for instance, where you have elected representatives that come to the town hall meetings, people who are on these standing boards. What we have is a sort of more loosely organized system where people come to express their concerns. So that's the nature of a town hall meeting in Arizona. Often it's conflictive, depending on the district and depending on the affiliation of the representative. And what you find is that some people will just get out there and start yelling about things, but often they don't really have an idea of what their representative can do for them. So the ways that we address problems in Washington is by committee, and often the committee designations of the representatives are not necessarily up to what is important in their districts, right? So here in Arizona, people are worried about Social Security. At the time of the recordings that I did, they were worried about Social Security, about immigration, but Congressman Colby was on none of those committees. He was on the Ways and Means Committee, which was a totally different thing. So he still had to listen and acknowledge and save face for the people that were arguing with him, but he didn't really have a clear way to address their concerns.
Well, it sounds like there's really a high level of frustration in these town halls. But what can we learn from your observations and going forward as we try to bring more civil discourse into our society?
Yeah, one thing that I learned from my data was that often I think that representatives and constituents would benefit from some type of discourse analysis training, especially, for instance, sometimes a constituent would get very flustered and argumentative, and the representative would say, calm down. And that would really inflame the person that was trying to get their point across, because the assumption behind calm down is that you're not being rational, that you're not calm. and you're explosive or divisive, and that sort of wording was really irritating for the people that were trying to talk to the constituent.
So Norma, in the 30 seconds we have left, talk to us about what you would do. You're talking about this kind of training, which sounds pretty intricate. Is there something quick we can do, or at least a simpler training?
I think that some of what happens around presidential debates could be really useful, right? Where before the town hall meeting starts, we all just get prepped, and somebody tells us a town hall meeting is about all of us expressing our different opinions and perhaps agreeing to disagree.
Norma, thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
We'll end tonight's show with some excerpts from a speech former U.S. Senator Olympia Snowe gave last week. She spoke at the University of Arizona's James E. Rogers College of Law. Her speech was part of a McCormick Society lecture series. Snowe talked about her desire to end partisan divides among federal lawmakers.
Congress continues to display a propensity for governing the country by delay, default, and deferral. It sort of reminds me of the captain of the Titanic, always manufacturing an iceberg to hit, because that's precisely what Congress has done time and time again. And that ultimately has resulted in the abandonment of policy making and devolved into a practice of gotcha votes. It's always about leveraging one's political position to the detriment of the other side. And it also becomes about messaging. It's about messaging an amendment not designed to solve a problem, but rather designed to appeal to the political base, a targeted political base, and to raise money and to enshrine it in the next election in a 30-second soundbite. Get the government we demand. We are a representative democracy. If we demand bipartisanship and value consensus building, we will get it. And so we have to provide a political reward for those who are willing to reach across the political aisle, and for those who don't should pay a political penalty. And frankly, we have to demand that accountability at the polls, and of course during the course of the year. I have formed Olympia's List, which is a political action committee, because I want to support candidates in primary who are going to be centrist. Because one of the problems is the fact that we don't get more center-right, center-left candidates emerging from primaries. Bipartisan legislative partnerships are absolutely crucial, if not indispensable, to minimizing the political barriers and maximizing the potential of Congress. You would not have had Social Security, a Medicare, a Civil Rights Act, a Voting Rights Act woven into the fabric of our country if they had been voted on along purely partisan lines.
That's our show. To keep up with the latest news and watch the segments from this and other editions of AZ Illustrated, go to our website, news.azpm.org. I'm Maria Parham. Thanks for watching.